Alright, everything should be good. I've got stuff turned off over there, I've got stuff turned on over there, and everything seems to be broadcasting. Yes? Yes, it does appear to be broadcasting. So, let's go ahead and get this started. Because today's going to be kind of a chill day. So, here it goes. There it's gone. Hello! Katt back, and today, I don't have a topic for today. Okay, so I'm going to reveal a little bit of how bad I am at doing this. I don't really have a whole lot of plans when it comes to these lectures. I tend to rely on inspiration. So I follow the news, I follow politics, I follow culture, I follow things like that. And if I feel particularly inspired to do something, I'll throw together a lecture on it. This week, I am not inspired. Well, I mean, I kinda am, but at the same time, the things that inspire me are things that have already been done to death, and so I didn't want to rehash everything. Like, I would like to talk about what's going on at the Texas border, but that has literally been the subject of conversation everywhere for the last week. What could I possibly say about that is going to be in any way new or revolutionary or anything like that? I have a few comments on it, but nothing that I can really stretch into a full-on lecture. I also have some stuff that I need to go back on. There was a stream that I did a while back that I started, but I was never able to finish because my internet is spotty sometimes and it went out and that was it. I mean, I live out in the sticks. It happens. And unfortunately, living out in the sticks as I am, my internet options are slim. I live so far out in the sticks that even Comcast doesn't exist out here, okay? To give you an idea, even Comcast does not exist where I am, and Comcast is garbage. And I can't even get Comcast. So, I mean, the very fact that I can do this at all is nothing short of an impressive miracle. So, we got a couple of smaller things to talk about. And other than that, if there's anything that you're interested in, we can discuss that as well. And so topics may come up as we're going. We'll spend a couple hours here, we'll chit-chat, we'll relax. It's going to be a good day. We're going to have fun. I see that JP is already in the chat. JP says we're going down the rabbit hole today. We very well could be. I love bunnies. And if I see a bunny, you better believe I'm chasing it. Okay? I'm going to love it, and hold it, and pet it, and call it George, and then just like the retard in Of Mice and Men, I'm probably going to kill it, because bunnies are about as fragile as glass. Yeah, if you didn't know that, rabbits have really weak spines. Which is why I always really, really, really wanted a bunny. And then I found out that rabbits are really, really, really fragile, and I'm just like, you know what? I don't need that kind of stress in my life. It's a little bit like having a chinchilla, except rabbits are tougher than chinchillas, but that's not saying much because, unfortunately, if you have a pet chinchilla, or you know somebody who has a pet chinchilla, they will tell you that you can basically kill a chinchilla just by picking it up. I mean, chinchillas are made of lace. They'll just fold up if you pick them up. It's not good. And rabbits, not much better. So, as much as I love them, can't have them as pets. I would probably kill it. JP also says, be inspired by your YouTube partnership. Yes, it is true. I am actually a YouTube partner now. I have arrived. And I have most of it set up, I think. So if you look down underneath the video, there should be a join button now. And I say there should be a join button because even I see a join button under my own video. Even though I don't know how I join my own channel when it's my channel. Either way though, there should be a button down there. So if you're feeling just extra generous. For less than $1 a month, I think that's how it works, it's $1 a month, you can support my channel. I have a Patreon as well, except I kind of hate my Patreon. The Patreon only has 3 tiers on it. And those 3 tiers are Humble Support, which has 4 slots on it, each one of them being $3. And then there is Basic Support, which is $5 a month, and there's Industrial Support, which is $10 a month. And the reason I did those that way is because when I was setting up Patreon, I want to do $1 a month, and Patreon will send you a really big nasty message if you try to do that, saying that, you know, we're going to be taking like, I don't know, like I think it's like 30 or 40% of every dollar that comes in. So if you only charge $1, you're not going to make $1. So you should really be charging more like $3 minimum, and you should go up from there. And I was kind of like, I don't know about that, because I don't really provide a whole lot. I provide some decent entertainment. I provide knowledge and insight, especially in my lectures, and some of that bleeds over into my other series. But it's not like I'm giving things out yet. I have some plans for things like merch in the future, and not just like hats and t-shirts. I have plans for unique merch. If I can get things arranged, because there's a lot of things that got to fall into place for that. I'm talking like custom printing, things like that. And then I would have to do assembly, and there's a lot involved. But as it stands right now, I don't do a whole lot, and so putting a $5, $10 tier on Patreon always felt really bad. I really don't like it. But I do have a patron there, and so I can't just like kill it and start over. However, the YouTube membership feels a lot better. It's $1 a month. And if you feel like it, great. And if not, fantastic. That's fine. You don't need to do anything. I'm not hiding anything. There is an option for me to do stuff early and reserve it for members. I may get back into the habit of that, although I can't promise anything. I tried that once before. Didn't make a difference. I was doing my videos a week earlier and sharing them on the Discord. But I looked at the analytics on the videos. Nobody's watching them early, so I stopped doing it. I may give it a try if I get some members and see if anybody is interested in those. I'll have to wait and see. So that's where things stand on that one. And that's all I really want to say about it. I mean, I'm not really good at the whole self-promotion thing. I don't like doing the whole self-promotion thing. It feels preachy. I don't like being preached at. I don't like doing the preaching. So I'll just leave it at that and say it's there. And it's probably the last time I'll mention it. I know, it's bad. I should put that in like every video, but I'm not going to. This is why I'm not successful. Well, okay, I'm a little successful, but I probably could have done it a lot sooner if I was better at promoting myself. Anyway, let's get into some actual topics. And the first topic that I do want to talk about today is going to be the whole Texas border thing. And for what it's worth, let me just pull up a browser page so we know what we're talking about. Texas border. Okay, sure, that's fine. We can do that. The standoff in Eagle Pass. Sounds like they could make a movie out of that. Never actually been to Eagle Pass. Although I did live in Texas for like 10 years, so that's kind of my fault. I knew people that went down there. I don't like traveling, so I never went with them. But there we go. We'll put this up. We'll turn this on. And that did nothing. There we go. Now we got something. Okay, now we got something to tell us what we're looking at here. So I just want to talk briefly about the border thing going on in Texas. And like I said, I'm not going to linger on this one. Mostly because I want to talk about the ramifications of this and where things are going to go from here. So, in terms of what's actually going on down at the border, I want to go back to the very, very first direct message that I ever did, and that was on law. And I want to talk about the concept of law because I felt like people had no real understanding of what laws were. And the reason that I feel like people did not understand what laws were is because we've all been kind of raised in a society where the idea of laws, they have been treated as kind of like walls. As in, like, there is a law here that says you cannot do this. And when it says that you cannot do whatever this is, it's like a wall. It's like if I say, I'm going to put you in a room with no windows and no doors and tell you to stay inside. Well, you have no choice but to stay inside. You're in a room with no windows or doors. You cannot just walk through walls, ergo, you cannot leave the room even if you wanted to. And many people believe that laws are absolute, kind of like the physical laws of the universe. Oh my god, JP, you actually joined? Thank you! JP is the first member of the Crepuscular Clouder. Which, by the way, if you're confused on that name, I'm going to have to deviate a little bit from my conversation on law for a second. The Crepuscular Clouder. Number one, I love alliteration, okay? Alliteration is one of my favorite things in the world. So I had to work it in there somewhere. Also, I love to teach. And so anytime that I can teach somebody a new word, I love to take advantage of that. Now, my name is Shadowcat. I have been Shadowcat for the last... Well, my birthday is next month, so let's go ahead and call it 20 years that I have been going by the name Shadowcat online. As such, rolling around names for the membership on the channel, I wanted to make it something that was thematic to the channel, and the channel is me. I had some very good suggestions. For example, I had one suggestion that I should do something RimWorld themed, given that RimWorld is my absolute favorite game in the world, hands down. However, RimWorld is not all that I do, and so having it centered around that doesn't really feel right. I had another suggestion that I actually just, name it Shadowcat, but I'm just like, well, I can't have a whole bunch of Shadowcats running around because then, that's my name. It's kind of like when they tried to make Natalie Portman Thor. You can't make somebody else Thor. That's his name. It's not a title. It's not a rank. It's his name. So I thought and said, you know what I want to do? I want to have a Clouder. Okay? And in case you didn't know, a Clouder is just the name for a bunch of cats. Okay? There's actually several names for a bunch of cats, but Clouder is one of the more prominent ones. Kind of like you can have a parliament of owls, a murder of ravens, whatever other groups that you want to think of. A pride of lions, things like that. So I wanted to make sure that my followers are going to be a Clouder. And then it's like, okay, so we got the second part, but now we need an adjective. We got a noun, we need an adjective. And I'm thinking, adjectives, what do we want? Something shadow related. And so I thought about it, I said something shadow related, something alliterative, what are we going to do? And then it hit me, crepuscular. And a lot of people right now are saying, well, what the hell does crepuscular mean? Crepuscular is a terminology used to describe animals. In particular, animals that are active during the twilight times of the day-night cycle. So these are animals that are most active at dawn and dusk. And they will tend to sleep through either the day or night, and they will simply be kind of low energy during the other side. So they may be active during the dawn, and then they may hide and nest and everything else during the daytime. They'll come out again at dusk, and then they'll sleep through the night. Or maybe vice versa, but either way, they're active during dawn and dusk, during the twilight times. So why did I go with that? Well, not only is this the twilight times of the day and night, but it is the time, both times during the day, when shadows are the longest. During dawn is when shadows first appear as the sun comes over the horizon, and so shadows are the longest, and then as the sun rises, shadows shorten until noon when they finally disappear. More or less. They don't actually disappear unless you're at the equator, which honestly is something that I would kind of like to experience someday. I've seen pictures of it, and the pictures are wild. But it is something that happens regularly at the equator because they get direct sunlight at the equator at noon. There are no shadows. It looks like a game with shadows turned off. It is incredibly disturbing. And then likewise, at dusk, shadows are the longest until there is not enough light left to cast shadows, in which case they just disappear. So, these are two very specific times and very influential for shadows, and so I had to go with it. And thus, the crepuscular clouder was born. I'm sure that I'll have to explain this like 7 more times. And that's fine. I can explain as many times as anybody wants. And JP says, wait, did you say that I was first to join? Actually, yes, you are the first to join. I don't know if I have a list or something somewhere. I might. I should be able to see who all is part of the membership. But I'll have to look at that later, because I really have no idea at the moment. This is all still very new to me. So, yeah, that is the name. That's the explanation behind it. It's kind of like the Lotus Eaters podcast. If you've never seen the Lotus Eaters podcast, very good podcast run by Carl Benjamin, previously known as Sargon of Akkad. And they have had to explain the Lotus Eaters the Lotus Eaters name just so many times, because the Lotus Eaters podcast is a reference to, I think it's Homer's Odyssey, but I could be wrong. When on Odysseus's, it is Odysseus, right? It's been a really long time. Either way, during their journeys, they came across an island of philosophers, dreamers, artists who spent their time eating lotus blossoms. And basically just kind of wasting their lives away and really accomplishing nothing. So that's kind of where they got their inspiration from. And still nobody gets it. But you know what? You don't have to get it. It's a good name. And it's a clever name for them, so it works. JP says, put the definition in the description. That's probably a good idea, actually. Okay. Anyway, though. Back on topic. So, I was talking about laws. And I talked about how people treat laws as these actual, like, physical barriers to doing something. I mean, how can you, leave a room with no windows or doors, you can't just walk through the walls. At the same rate, a lot of people will look at the actions that criminals take in the world, and they'll ask themselves, well, how could you do that? And the reason they ask, how could you do that, is because most people have a general sense of morality that simply will not allow them to do things. This is part of us being the thinking ape. This is part of us being civilized. Most of us have lines that we would be otherwise incapable of crossing. And to that end, and this is something that I cannot substantiate myself, this is just a not talked about story that I've heard from the military. What I've heard from the military, from people who have actually served in combat, we're talking like Afghanistan, Iraq, places like that. What I've heard is this. You go through basic training, you go through rifle school, you go through everything like that. You finally get assigned to whatever deployment you're going on, or whatever unit you're going to, and then you get told where you're going and what you're going to be doing. To this point, you have done nothing but shoot at targets. However, once you get to a place like Iraq or Kuwait or Afghanistan or wherever it is that you're going, and you're actually facing off against other people, there is a line. Most people, and that includes most soldiers, have never had to face actually killing somebody before. It is a traumatic experience. And it's one that nobody ever really wants to do, nobody wants to get involved with, but when you take the job of a soldier, it's one that you accept that you have a very high likelihood of being put into. And as I've heard it described, is that most people, most soldiers, as soon as they're put in a position where they have to kill, they see a target, they sight the target, they pull the trigger, and they see the red mist and their target drop. Most soldiers have a violent reaction to that. Apparently the most common one is that most soldiers will vomit, like on the spot or immediately after the fighting stops, as a reaction to having killed somebody for the first time. And I've heard soldiers say that the only true soldiers that are really bothered by are the ones who don't have that reaction when they kill somebody, because there's something wrong with that person. You keep an eye on that one. Or you send them to sniper school, I guess. One or the other. I can't confirm this. I was never in the military, nor do I actually know anybody in the military. However, I have no reason not to believe it, and I will actually take that story as gospel because it makes sense to me. Most people are not just uncomfortable, most people are repelled by the idea of doing something that goes against their moral code in some way. Now, this is an extreme example. I'm talking about killing another person. But on average, most people who live in a society are unwilling to break the rules of that society. Even if it's something as simple as shoplifting. If you were to tell somebody, just go into a random store, go to the grocery store, and tell a customer, hey, take a candy bar, put it in your pocket, and walk out. I promise you, no one is going to notice. Nobody will know it's you. They won't even know it happened until inventory time came around, and they might not even notice then because all they do is they watch until the box is empty, and they order a new one. just steal the candy bar. And most people will tell you no. The reason why is because most people are turned off. They are repelled by the idea of breaking a law like this. They know it's wrong, and it feels wrong to do something that is wrong. It's why we call it wrong. It's illegal, yes. However, it also just feels bad. Now, this is nowhere even close to on par with actually killing somebody, but both phenomena are related to the same thing. We are averse to doing things that we feel are wrong. And the more severe the wrong thing is, the... what's the word I want? The greater the reaction we have to it is. Stealing a candy bar is going to have a very low reaction. I mean, we don't want to do it. However, even if we did do it, we're not going to feel too bad about it. We stole a $1 candy bar. It's not the end of the world. However, what if you were to steal somebody's phone, steal somebody's wallet, steal their car, destroy their car? Every step up is going to make us more and more repelled by the action being suggested. And so most people feel that because our morals stop us from doing these things, and because our laws are by and large based upon our morals, then laws must be as big of a barrier as an actual brick and mortar wall, because we would find it just as difficult to break the law as we would to leave a room with no windows or doors. This is a very understandable way to feel about things, but it is a flawed one. Because in reality, these morals are virtual. They don't actually exist anywhere other than in our own minds. And the same is true with laws. Laws may exist on paper. However, the words on paper filed in a drawer, in a cabinet, in the basement of a building all the way across town have no actual power or influence on our daily lives. Even though there is a law on paper that says shoplifting is wrong, there is nothing stopping you from shoplifting. Even though we have multiple laws that say theft is wrong, if somebody leaves their phone out, there is nothing actually stopping you from taking their phone and walking away. Also, if you just see somebody with their back turned to you and you happen to have a knife, there is absolutely nothing stopping you from plunging that knife into their back all the way to the hilt. Laws, as we understand them as they are, laws don't exist. And I hate to really put it like that, but it's true. The laws, air quotes, laws that we have do not exist. They only exist so far as we agree to follow them. And the minute that we do not follow them, they are revealed to be exactly what they are. Nothing. They are words on paper. And it's only once we understand that laws only exist in a virtual sense that we can really begin to understand what does law actually mean, how do they function, and why are they important. See, once we understand that laws do not exist, now we have to redefine If laws don't actually exist, then what is a law? In effect, a law is just a rule that we as a community, as a society, as a civilization, have decided that we are all going to abide by, and that the action that we are making illegal is something that we collectively will not tolerate. That is to say that if you were to break the law, not only are you going to be punished, but you will be punished by the entirety of society. Okay? That there will be nobody coming to your aid. There is nobody who's going to get you out of this. We, as a collective whole, are going to punish you. And by the way, this is why when you go to court, when you go to civil court, you have a plaintiff and a defendant. And the plaintiff could be your neighbor, or it could be you. The defendant could be your neighbor, or it could be you. But in a criminal case, it is you, the defendant, versus the state. Why? Because it is a crime against the whole. It is a crime against the entire population, and the entire population is going to punish you. The state is merely the extension and the representation of those people. And as a matter of fact, when the court case is filed, I do believe, and this probably changes from state to state, given, laws change to state, but I do believe that when it is filed in court, it literally says the people or the people of state versus whoever the defendant is. This is the foundation of laws. These are the things that we as a people have agreed upon. Now, that being explained as a decent foundation, we can also understand that because these laws are only virtual and this is just the collective agreement of our community and our society, there is nothing stopping these people from breaking laws. And people will break laws all the time. Everything from simple petty shoplifting to murder. And that is the problem that we see right now in the US and so very, very many other countries in the world, primarily countries in the West. There are currently other cultures that are integrating themselves into most Western nations. And as they're doing so, these cultures have their own values. Their values are not our values. As such, our laws based upon our values do not mix with their values. They do not respect our values, ergo, they do not respect our laws, which is why they break the laws with impunity. As such, it puts us in the position of we either have to enforce the laws or we have to acknowledge that the laws are virtual, that they have no actual power behind them, and that without that power behind them enforced by the community, they do not exist. And this is where we are with the standoff at Eagle Pass and essentially the entire southern border of the US. And to a lesser extent, even though nobody talks about it, the northern border of the US, because neither one of them is being enforced at the moment. However, the one at the southern border is so much bigger and so much of a bigger problem. Now here's the thing. Most people, when they're discussing this, they do so from a position of, number one, laws are absolute and to break a law should be absolutely impossible, if not simply unconscionable. When neither one of those is actually true. But again, as I explained, most people have a hard time seeing beyond what they could not do. If they could not do it, they simply assume that it's impossible for this to really be done, therefore it must not be happening. Obviously, it is. Then, we have to look at the people who are actually in charge of enforcing the laws, and what are they saying. So we have people who already believe that, number one, the laws are already in place and this should not be happening. But now we also have people in charge, specifically our current executive administration and our current judicial administration, it seems. Possibly the legislative one as well, I don't know yet, who have no interest in actually enforcing the laws. So the US already has laws on immigration. We have laws that say that anybody who crosses the border and does not do so through a port of entry has committed a crime called illegal entry. And that is true whether you are a citizen, a non-citizen, an alien, whatever. If you cross the border and do not go through a port of call, you have committed a crime. If you are here without any citizenship or proper paperwork, you have committed yet another crime. You are illegally occupying the US. I don't think that's the actual name of the crime, but regardless, that's what you're doing. So now we're up to 2 crimes, and there are several more that I'm sure could be tacked on here as well. The point is that simply by being here, you have committed a crime. We have laws for this. But those laws are not being enforced. I mean, the border is being left wide open. The current administration has stated they're going to leave the border wide open. And many people simply look at this and say, well, you can't do that. How can you do that? And the answer is simple. Just like somebody can walk into a grocery store, stick a candy bar in their pocket and walk out, the government administration can simply not enforce the border. There's nothing stopping them from not doing it. Obviously, nobody is going to, or nobody has the ability to hold them accountable for it. There's literally nothing stopping them from doing it. It's interesting because there's a parallel here. And one of the things that I heard that I actually like came from the abortion debate. You had a lot of people who were arguing that abortion should be legal, abortion should be illegal, it should be banned, it should be allowed, it should be limited. And then I heard one person make an argument, and I loved this argument, and they said that abortion should not be illegal. It should be unconscionable. Which is to say, if you've never heard that word before, it should never even be possible for it to enter your mind. It should be so repugnant an idea, a notion, that it should make you sick at the very thought that you might be able to go and do that. It shouldn't even need to be made illegal because nobody should ever want to do it in the first place. And I do think that that is an absolutely wonderful, clarifying way to look at the abortion debate. And similarly, it should be an absolutely wonderful and clarifying way to look at the current border situation. Having an actual border and processing people properly should be the default. The idea of stripping down the nation's border walls, of simply allowing everybody in and letting them disappear into the deserts to die or be maimed or whatever happens, as the responsible party for the nation, as the parent, essentially, who is supposed to take care of all the little baby states, this should be unconscionable. And I say this because as things stand right now, and this is something that I try to get people to understand when they talk about the whole Texas border thing, and they ask, why are they doing this? Why will the government refuse to enforce the border? And I have to explain this to them. We are a divided nation. And I don't mean that we disagree. I mean that we are divided. There is a clear defining line right down the middle, and one side absolutely hates the other. And I don't use that word lightly. When I say hatred, I mean irrational hatred. See, you can dislike something. I dislike a lot of things. I dislike Brussels sprouts. I like cabbage, but I think that Brussels sprouts are just awful. Even though I realize that Brussels sprouts are just basically like tiny cabbages. I dislike I dislike rain. I do not want to be in the rain, okay? I dislike the rain. And if it's raining, I want to stay inside. I dislike a lot of things. But I don't hate them. I may not want them, but I don't hate them. I would not go out of my way to try and ban Brussels sprouts, or to try and change the weather to make sure that it never ever rains again. Hatred causes you to want to remove something from existence. Because it takes hatred to really to give you the motivation to actually do something about it. This is why when people say, oh, I hate something, it's like, well, do you? I mean, we are hyperbolic as a people. We will always tend to over-exaggerate things. Most people don't hate as many things as they say they do. They just don't like them. In this case, however, when it comes to the political parties, and more specifically, the political ideologies in the US and in most Western countries, we have two sides that absolutely hate each other. They hate each other to the point of wanting to eliminate each other, to annihilate the other side. Not just the people, but the ideologies as well. They want not just the people gone, but they want every memory of them gone, every record of them gone, every monument to them gone, every last vestige of them gone. And this is not new. We saw this during the Holocaust with the Jews. We saw this with the Armenians, as well as many others. We saw this with the Tutsis, I believe it was. This is not a new phenomenon. Whenever a group hates another group enough, they will try to eradicate them from existence and from history. And that's what we see right now. Right now, what nobody really wants to talk about is this is an attempt to destroy Texas. To destroy it as an institution, if not simply annihilate the entire state. The idea is not difficult. We have millions, and that is not an exaggeration, we have millions of migrants coming. And they are all, more or less, coming up into one place, that being Texas. Now, you have a household, okay? Let's bring this down. Let's bring this down into a scale that most people will be able to really identify with. Oh, I see Blizz in the chat. Hello, Blizz. Good to have you here. So anyway, let's bring this down to a scale you can really comprehend. You have a household, And I'm just going to go with an average household, okay? Your household will differ. I have to make generalizations. But let's say you were a household of 4, okay? Yourself, your partner, 2 children. Maybe it's 1 child and another partner, I don't know. But let's just say it's a household of 4 and you do quite well for yourselves, okay? You're living a very comfortable life. Now, what if I was to say, well, I have some people and I need to house them. They don't make any money. I cannot promise you that they're going to help out with anything, but they need to be housed. They need to be fed. They need to be sheltered, clothed, everything else. How many people is it? Do you just need to take in an extra bed or something? No. I need to send 12 more people into your household, okay? And I'm going to need you to take care of them. You would rightly look at that and say, that is absolutely impossible. There is no way that you could take on 12 more people, house them in your house, clothe them, feed them, shelter them, and everything else. No way. You wouldn't even make it to the end of the week before you would all be starving. And then you would all be homeless. And thus we see the point. The point of this all is, the current administration is heavily Democrat, okay? And when I say heavily Democrat, I really just want to say it's heavily leftist, okay? Because it doesn't really matter what we call the name of the party, they just happen to be the ones in charge. It's the ideology that we have to look at. They are a leftist ideology. We are talking all of these socialists, communists, Marxists, all of these people are all in one big basket, along with all the elites that are, siding with them. Texas, however, is a stronghold state. Just like California is a leftist stronghold, Texas is a conservative stronghold. And this cannot be allowed to stand, not if they want to retain power and they want to secure votes for the future. They do not want to have any conservative strongholds. They do not want to have any conservative states. They would like to have purple states, swing states, at the most. However, they would of course prefer it if every single state were blue. So, every single state is going to have to be destroyed. Absolutely and utterly destroyed from the ground up. Now, how do I know that this is the plan? I will explain it to you. They know full well what they're doing. They know that if they are to bring in several million more illegal aliens into the nation, especially and particularly into Texas, this will be enough. Just like if I were to give you 12 more people to fit into your household, this will be enough to break Texas economically. It will break them economically, and once you break the economy, the industry will fall apart afterwards. Once the industry falls apart, everything else will fall apart after it. This will destroy Texas as an industrial power, as an economic power, as an influential power. This will destroy Texas. And that's the point. Here's the problem, though. Texas has decided that if we're going down, well, you can go down with us. And this is when Texas began its campaign of busing and flying migrants all over the country. In particular, to every single sanctuary city and state that said that migrants are welcome. Most particularly, New York City and Chicago. Now, how do I know that they are attempting to destroy Texas and that this is not some kind of conspiratorial flight of fancy? The reason I know this is because the economic damage being done to Texas is also being done to the other cities. And they know it too. The reason they know it is because they are trying to stop it. Every single one of those other cities is now trying to put a damper, at least, on the number of migrants coming into their cities, and both of those cities have already announced that they're in a state of emergency because there are too many people there. They're costing too much money to take care of, both to house, feed, everything else. And the states are on the cusp of collapse. Okay? Well, if the cities are on the cusp of collapse and they have only gotten a fraction of what Texas has gotten, then what must the condition of Texas be like right now? Okay, that's part of it. But that's not the entirety of it. We need that part of it. We need to know that the migrant invasion is damaging. Okay? We've established that now. And we need to keep that one, just take that little point, put a pin in it, make sure that you can come back and reference that. Now, we know that it's destructive, and that we know these cities are trying to put measures into place to stem the flow of migrants into their cities, to stop it from happening in their cities before the cities completely go under. But they are also simultaneously fighting to keep the southern border open so they can continue to come into Texas. And they're trying to make it illegal for Texas to send them outside of their state. So they want to make sure that all the migrants are kettled inside of Texas and that nobody else gets any of them. So we know that they're destructive. We know that this whole invasion is harmful to whoever gets them. And we want to make sure that it doesn't go to our cities. We want to make sure that it stays in your state. Thus we can see the end goal of this. They are trying to destroy Texas. But they're not going to do it through bombs. They're not going to do it through guns. They're not going to do it through anything else. All they're going to do is nothing. And this is where we get back to the subject of laws. See, we have a current administration which absolutely hates, despises, abhors Texas. And anybody who shares the same ideologies and virtues of them. These are the same people who are also sworn to uphold our laws, and they're not doing it. Why? Because, much as the people coming here are violating our laws because they don't respect them, because they do not share our values, the current administration also does not share our values. The current administration is a completely different culture. They have their own values and principles. They are incompatible with our values and principles as the more conservative parts of the country. And as such, they do not care about our laws. They see our laws as being at best irrelevant, being completely virtual, completely ethereal, and at worst they see them as a roadblock and a vestige of an old, archaic time that needs to be removed, replaced, and forgotten. And now that we have this in perspective, we can go back and look at what's happening in Texas right now and see it for what it is. It's not a border crisis. Not as such. Is there a crisis at the border? Yes, there is. But the crisis is that we are essentially in pre-Nazi Germany right now. This is basically the Weimar Republic. Okay? This is the Balkanized states going at each other. The only difference is, during the Balkanized states era, they kind of had to go at each other head on. nobody really had that much authority over the other one. You had the communists versus the fascists. You had different ideologies, different races, but nobody had a leg up. What we have in the US right now, however, is you have a government with supreme power going after a state. Although how supreme that power is now being called into question. We're in a very interesting intersection because right now we do have two clashing cultures, two clashing ideologies, like we saw during the days of the Weimar Republic. At the same time, however, we also see the dichotomy between the government and the state like we did before the first U.S. Civil War. And I have to call it the first U.S. Civil War because we may already be in the second. This is something that I'm not going to dwell on because you've probably heard it in other places, but when people talk about the U.S. Civil War, when they're asked about, what started the Civil War, the answer to that is there were a myriad of things that led up to the Civil War. No single one can be blamed. People will say that the Civil War was about slavery. It was. But it wasn't the only thing it was about. People will say that the Civil War was about states' rights. And it was. But that wasn't the only thing that it was about. It was about many different things. But the thing that really kicked off the entire thing would be the Battle of Fort Sumter. And this was the point where it finally came to blows. This was the point where all other diplomacy had broken down, where both sides had said, I'm planting my feet and I'm not going to move. Until one side finally said, if you will not move, I will move you. In this case, it was the Fort Sumter, which was located in Virginia, I believe. Virginia, of course, was a Confederate state. It had seceded from the Union and declared themselves independent. The Union, of course, said that that fort was built by us. It is still occupied by us, and it belongs to us. You have no claim over it, F.O. And the state of Virginia said, it's in our territory. You are not welcome here. You will not be tolerated here. You will leave the fort, you will surrender it to us, and you will return peacefully to the Union States. Both sides planted their feet until eventually it came down to one is going to make the other move. Now, who fired the first shot? Until we invent time travel, we'll never know. All we do know is that eventually somebody opened fire, and that began the Battle of Fort Sumter, largely regarded as the first battle of the Civil War. We now stand at a moment just like that. We have the two cultures that are clashing in the US right now, but down at the border, we have the US government saying, tear down every last foot of border wall that we have. No more walls, no more fences, no more wires, no nothing. The state of Texas has said that, no, we're not going to do that. This is our border as much as it is the federal border, and we are going to defend it no matter what, because we're the ones that are suffering. And so just like Fort Sumter, we have two entities, one state, one federal, claiming supremacy over the same plot of land. Both sides have planted their feet. Now it's going to come down to one side to either back down or one side to try and move the other. Now, there may be news on this that I am not privy to at the moment, because the deadline given by the federal government to surrender was yesterday. And I have not checked the news this morning. We may already be in hot conflict. I don't think so. I doubt it. But I also can't discount it. I don't know what's going on right now. But the point is that we now stand at the precipice of that moment. Now, how does this dovetail with the whole Weimar Republic thing? Well, violence did eventually break out in the Weimar Republic, and this led to greater conflicts between the different parties. However, after the dust settled there, I don't know the entire history of it very well, but as I remember, after things had settled down in the Weimar Republic, this was basically leading us into the German superstate. And this is where we had the Reichstag forming, with significant parties from the Weimar Republic having a lot of seats there, specifically the communists. You had other groups that were vying for power. This, of course, led into what was it? The NAD. I don't remember. The Nazi Party. Gaining enough seats to have total power over the Reichstag. This then led into the Reichstag fire, the blaming of the communists for it, the purging of the communists from literally everything. And, I mean, you know the rest of it. We've covered it in other videos. We are currently facing down both of those. We have a party in the US that wants to purge the other party from power. We have a conflict over territory, and we are looking to basically start a civil war to lead us into creating the Fourth Reich in the US. It's a weird time. It's probably going to be a fascinating time, assuming that anyone is still alive at the end of this. But the important thing that I want to cover right now is to help you understand what is going on, why it is going on. I mean, which I think I've pretty well established now. You know where the parties are, why they're there. As for what comes out of this, I don't know. What I do know is that both sides have planted their feet, and now, unfortunately, violence is basically the only answer. And the reason for it is this. Technically, both sides have two choices, the way I see it. Two primary choices. There are tertiary, tangential things that could happen. But by and large, two choices, and that is fight or flight. Okay? They can either begin the fight and start the violence, or they can surrender. Now here's the problem. Texas cannot surrender. Texas cannot surrender any more than the rabbit can surrender to the fox. Because if the rabbit surrenders to the fox, the rabbit is dead. If Texas surrenders to the US government right now, Texas is gone. Surrender means that the border fences are decommissioned, demolished, and that the ports of authority are decommissioned and left vacant. The entire border will be completely open for anyone and everybody to come as they please. Surrender for Texas means that there will be an imposition put on sending migrants anywhere, and all the migrants that come in will be kettled in Texas. They will not be allowed to go anywhere. They will not be allowed to choose whether they want to go to San Francisco, or Chicago, or New York, or anywhere else. The government will force them to stay in Texas. Again, that was the entire point. They need to stay in Texas so that Texas dies. And die it will. Because if Texas surrenders, this only gets worse until eventually the economy collapses, the industry collapses, the infrastructure collapses, and people start starving. That's the point. They will annihilate the native population of Texas. They will replace them with migrants. And once they do that, they will have changed the voter base and thus changed the state from being a conservative stronghold to a Democrat stronghold. And they will be able to do that basically without lifting a finger. An entire war fought without firing a shot. The alternative side to this is that the federal government surrenders and stands down. They can't do this. And they can't do this for the same reason that every single other totalitarian despot cannot do this. If you've ever seen the movie Ants, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the movie Ants, it was an animated movie from back in the 90s. Not a very good movie, in my opinion, but it had a few salient moments in it. And one of them is between the grasshoppers when they're discussing the ants. And they say the reason why we have to continuously oppress and suppress the ants is because one ant is nothing. 2 ants is nothing. But the entire ant colony outnumbers the grasshoppers over 1,000 to 1. If they ever realized the power they had in sheer numbers alone, the grasshoppers would never stand a chance. There is but one federal government. It has but one seat of power. That is Washington, D.C. It has many troops. But as I have pointed out in previous live streams talking about the subject, the United States military numbers somewhere in the area of 1 million. If we go back to the previous election, Donald Trump had 75 million votes. Think about that. Outnumbered 75 to 1 in just the military alone. And by the way, that's going to be really hard since a lot of those people, like thousands of them, are located everywhere else in the world. My favorite ships are aircraft carriers. We have a dozen of them, I think, something like that. And every single one of them has a crew of approximately 5,000 people. So right there you have roughly 60,000 people on aircraft carriers alone. To say nothing of their supporting fleets, to say nothing of the multitude of military bases that we have scattered across the world. Even if the US government wanted to turn the full force of the military on its own people, it would lose. Secondly, even if we're not looking at people as individuals, as it stands as of last night, which is the last time I checked the news, there are currently somewhere in the area of 30 states, that is 3/5 of the entire nation of the United States, who have thrown in their support behind Texas, who are turning their attention to the federal government and telling the federal government, you have crossed the line so egregiously that not only are we sending our soldiers and aid to Texas, but if you take action against Texas, we will stand behind Texas. This is how the Confederacy formed during the First Civil War. Several states decided they were no longer going to tolerate the Union government. And other states decided they were going to support those states, usually because of geography. As I understand it, there were states like Florida that did not want to be part of the Confederacy, but they said, well, what are our other options? So, As things currently stand, the US government is facing an all-out civil war if it does not surrender. But what if the federal government does surrender? Does this all just go away? No. No, it does not. Not in the least. Because the federal government surrenders, the federal government will be seen as weak, ineffective, impotent. Which it is. It really is, and it always has been. That was kind of the point of the US government in the first place. The US government was never meant to have a great deal of power. It was always supposed to be weak because, as they put it, the US was supposed to be a country for moral people. Again, we get back to the idea that laws are virtual, but it should be unconscionable to break a law, not impossible. If the federal government is shown to be as impotent and inconsequential as it actually is, the end result of this is going to be defiance on a scale hitherto unseen. If you think that the sedition of half of the Union of States was significant in the first Civil War, just wait until other states realize that the government actually cannot do anything so long as everybody stands against them. It would be essentially the dissolution of the United States of America and the return to these United States of America. Which personally I think would not be a bad thing. That was the way the US was designed in the first place, and it would probably do us a lot of good to go back to it. And I guarantee that if the federal government backs down, that is the direction that we're going. Because once they realize that they can't stop Texas from securing the border, well, what else can't the government stop them from doing? And we've already seen this, okay? We've already seen this a great deal. Before Roe v. Wade was overturned, we saw that many states were already banning abortion, and they said, look, you can't stop us. It's our state. We're not going to do it. Despite the fact that illegal aliens in the country are illegal, several states declared themselves to be sanctuaries and said that, you know what? If illegal aliens come to our state, we're not going to help you find them. We're not going to look for them. If we do know who they are, we're sure as hell not going to turn them over. You have no power here. And when conservative states figured that game out finally, they said, you know what? We're going to declare ourselves a Second Amendment sanctuary state. The National Firearms Act doesn't take effect here. Okay? We're not going to register any guns. We're not going to track any guns. If you come looking for them, we're not going to help you find them. And if we do find somebody, we're sure as hell not going to turn them over. The same thing is true with marijuana. Many states decriminalized it and said, you know what? You can keep it illegal at the federal level, but guess what? We're not going to recognize that. We're not going to help you. We're not going to give anybody over to you. We're going to tell you to sit and spin. And then we're going to turn our back to you and let you do whatever the hell you want. Without our help. Good luck. The government has already been shown to be absolutely impotent. It's just that the states have not yet realized the sheer breadth of what they can do. Most states, most people, still believe in a government that is all-powerful, that is all-reaching, all-seeing, to their own detriment, I might add. But this is going to shine a light on exactly what the government cannot do, unless, of course, neither side surrenders and it comes to blows. And at that point, things get ugly. And I can't even begin to predict what could happen there. So that's where we are now. That's why we are now, and where we could be in the future. So hopefully you can prepare accordingly for that. That's all I really wanted to say on that. It was kind of a lot to say, but it wasn't enough to take up an entire lecture, which is why I didn't want to title this one after the whole Texas thing. Because, like, everything else, you can go somewhere else and look it up. Everyone else is talking about it. Everybody else has their own take on it. That's just where things are right now. JP left a couple of chats. He says, my son and I just had a great conversation on this side about liberalism, hedonism, and the downfall of societies. It's a good conversation to have. You know, on that subject, I don't know if you've seen this movie. You probably have. It's an older movie, but if you haven't seen it, it's absolutely worth your time. And it's called Revenge of the Nerds. Funny movie. Really funny movie. And during the movie, they have a house party because this takes place on a college campus, and so every fraternity, every sorority has a house that they all live in. House parties were a really big thing. Might still be a really big thing. I'm not sure. I never went to like an actual college campus. But during the house party, once everything kicks off, one of the characters, who is completely oblivious to like the situation he's currently in, asks a question, and he says, Wait. Would you rather live during the ascendancy of a civilization or during its decline? And, you know, me being a child and hearing that, my first thought was, what? Because I didn't get it. And no child would get it. I know a lot of adults that probably would not get it. I know a lot of adults that would probably look at that and say, I don't understand what they're talking about. What do you mean the ascendancy of a civilization or decline? But it's really simple. When you look at every civilization in human history, and that does include the American civilization, the American Empire, every civilization grows until it stops growing. And then after that, it declines. And usually it declines slowly at first, and then very quickly. But here's the thing. If you live during the ascendancy of that civilization, you don't have time for hedonism. Okay? You don't have time for anything. You are working. You are building. You are learning. You are growing. Every day you have to put in the work. Every day you have to build another house. Every day you have to bury another pipe. Every day you have to build another car. You have to do these things because you are growing your empire. Every day is work. You work from the time that you're old enough to work to the time that you're ready to die, okay? Every day is work. However, because every day is work, times are good. Everybody is working, so everybody is employed. Since everybody is employed, everybody is fed. Everybody has a place to live. Everybody has a lot of things going for them. And so, hold on a second. Had to play tech support for a child. Okay, where was I? Right, I was talking about the ascendancy of civilizations. So everybody is working hard. This means that you don't really have time for things like hobbies. You will find time, of course, but you're also not going to have a lot of the things that we have like right now. Okay? You're not going to have like the mass communication that we have now because the infrastructure doesn't even exist yet. You're not going to have certain things or like certain fruits and vegetables because they don't grow here and you don't have the logistics set up yet. You're not going to have all the luxuries. But what you will have is family, common values, stability. You'll have everything that you need to, and you will by and large have everything that you need in abundance. You will not be living the high life, but you will be living comfortably. And this is going to continue until you have built all the houses, until you have built or, laid all the pipes, until you've strung all the wires, until you have created absolutely everything. And then you'll have generations that are going to be born and everything is already going to be built. And then they're going to rest on those laurels. And this is where it comes in, where it says, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. The reason why this is such a perfectly apt description of how things go is because once everything has been built, and nothing really needs to be built anymore, you are going to have an entire generation who's going to be able to say, we're here. We don't really need to do anything except enjoy it. The unfortunate part is that they will enjoy it, though, without actually maintaining it, because there's nothing else to really be done. And they're generally not taught that either. And that leads us to where we are now. Now, that's the ascendancy part of the civilization, the declining part of it. The declining part of it means that, number one, everything's getting worse. Okay? And if you look around, right now, everything is kind of getting worse. But you will have everything. Is everything getting worse? Yes. But you have all the best food. You have all the best houses. You have all the luxuries. You have technology. You have communications. You have anything that you can imagine. You have toys and pleasures and entertainment and everything that you could ever want. And the only problem with that is that because everything is so steeped in hedonism and nobody's actually maintaining it, is that you have all of the luxuries for 5 years, and then one of those luxuries is gone because the infrastructure to maintain it wasn't maintained. And then 5 years after that, you lose another luxury. It's okay though, you had 20 luxuries to begin with and now you're down to 18. Life is still good. And 5 years after that, you lose another luxury. You're down to 17. And 5 years after that, you lose another luxury. You're down to 16. And so every single time increment there, your life is getting worse. The longer that your civilization goes through its decline, life is getting worse. But at the same time, you're enjoying life because there's still so many luxuries left. And this is going to continue until there are no luxuries left. And then everybody is going to be brought low into the same position. Weak men lead to bad times, hard times. And then, once we land in hard times, what's going to happen? Well, it's all going to have to be rebuilt. And the soft men aren't going to survive. The hard men, however, will pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and they will get to work. Why? Because that's what you have to do. The world doesn't stop spinning just because things are not nice right now. However, what does that mean? It also means that we are back to the ascendancy of the civilization again, which means that all the people who are willing to do the work will be rewarded for doing the work. They're going to be paid well. They'll be able to take care of their families. There'll be plenty of places left to live in that are going to be empty now. And so we get back to work and we're back on that track. So, hence the question, would you rather live in the ascendancy of a civilization, or would you rather live during its decline? It's a wonderfully philosophical question, and it came out of a comedy of all things. It came out of a comedy, and it came out as part of a joke. But it is a wonderful topic to talk about. I see that Tux is in the chat. Hello, Tux. Good to see you here. JP also said, with the air wing on board of an aircraft carrier, that would be 6,200 personnel, with 15 to 20% of all military installations are people from Texas usually. I mean, that is actually a fair point, because when things do pop off, one thing that a lot of people are asking right now is if the federal government tries to federalize the Texas National Guard, which would be a violation of posse comitatus. Comitatus? Tatas. Otherwise, that would be a violation, but as we've already shown, the current administration does not carry any of those virtues anyway. They don't care about the laws. They don't care about any of the laws that are currently on the books regarding the border. They're not going to care about posse comitatus. They're not going to care about anything. They don't care about anything. They do not respect the laws of this land because they do not respect the land. They do not respect the people. They do not share anything in common with the people. And so they're not beholden to the same rules, regulations, and laws. So federalizing the Texas National Guard, absolutely within their ability to do, and absolutely within their ability to comprehend. The question then becomes, even if they do federalize the Texas National Guard, who are they going to stand with? As it was pointed out in the first U.S. Civil War, what's it called? Oh, I know what this place is. What's the name of the officer training school? The really, really prestigious one. I think it's in New York, but I thought it was in Virginia. I don't remember. Oh, this is going to bother me if I can't think of it. And I can't get hung up on it. Anyway, there's a really prestigious officer training school. It's been around forever. And it was located in Union Territory. It is not Annapolis. It's, no, it's not that one. Okay, now I am stuck on it. I've got to find out. What's it called? I gotta look this up. Otherwise, it's gonna bother me. And it's so easy. It's like one of the most prestigious military places on Earth. And the fact that I cannot think of it right now is just... I feel stupid right now. What is it called? What am I to do this? Most prestigious officer training academy? Maybe? West Point! That's it! Why the hell couldn't I remember West Point? Okay, West Point. And JP says Presidio. Presidio? Not sure how you pronounce that. West Point Military Academy, New York. Okay? The fact is that during the Civil War, West Point absolutely existed, okay? It was there. And when the Civil War kicked off, you had military officers from West Point who sided with the Confederacy. And it's kind of like, how could you do that? You went to school in West Point. The other students in West Point, the other officers and soldiers that went through there, they are your blood, okay? You swore an oath. Why? How could you go and join the Confederacy after going through there? And the answer, of course, was very simple. They're my people, okay? I went to West Point in New York. I was born in Alabama. Actually, I don't think Alabama exists at that point. I was born in Georgia. Okay, my family lives in Georgia. I am Georgian. And now that Georgia has declared, itself part of the Confederacy, I'm going back to my family. Because, it's like they say, blood thicker than water. It's not the whole part of that quote, but it suits me for right now. Even if they were to federalize the National Guard in Texas, there's no guarantee that those soldiers are actually going to obey the federal government. There is a very, very good chance that most of them would simply tell the government to sit and spin. And so when you look and you say, 15 to 20% of all military installations are people from Texas, that's a lot of people. And it really, really makes you wonder that if the U.S. government was to take up arms against a state, and in particular that state being Texas, how much of the army would actually go? Now see, I am a pessimist by nature. I always assume the worst of a situation, which I find works out very well for me, because by assuming the worst in every situation, I can either be right, or I can be happily wrong. See, I'm an optimistic pessimist. As such, when it comes to things like, would the military follow orders if they were given illegal orders, I generally assume yes, every time. And sending the army after Texas would absolutely be an illegal order. I do believe that most of them would follow illegal orders without a second thought. Or they might have second thoughts, however, as soon as, court-martial comes up and possibly being stuck in a brig for, well, let's be honest. If Texas wins, you're probably not going to be in a brig for very long. If Texas loses, you could be in a brig for the rest of your life. Or you might be in a brig long enough to be court-martialed and then sent to prison for the rest of your life. That would usually be enough to scare people into line. So I tend to believe that most military are going to follow orders. But that 15 to 20% of people that are from Texas, yeah, they're a wild card. I can't place them. Are they going to follow orders, or are they going to defy the military? They could go either way. And if the majority of them went for Texas, the military is not in a good place right now as it is. And if you lose that 15%, there's no way that you win after that. So we'll just have to wait and see on that one. Okay, but I think that's enough about the whole Texas thing. I've talked that one to death at this point. I think I covered that one pretty well. Anything else that we want to talk about? I did want to talk about a subject that was brought up a while back, and that was in terms of culture, in particular video gaming. But that was a subject that Flame had brought up, and I don't necessarily feel right talking about it without Flame being here. I could, but it really wouldn't feel right. Still, I could cover the subject, and then I could simply clip it and make sure that he's aware of it. Because Flame wanted to talk about gaming, and in particular Steam and its monopoly in the video gaming sector. Which it doesn't actually have a monopoly in the video gaming sector, especially these days. What with Good Old Games and Epic and, well, pretty much everybody else has their own online store, their own online launchers and everything like that. But it's still a subject worth talking about. And even though I didn't really get to talk about it a lot before, I did want to talk about that day the subject of digital ownership versus real ownership, which is something that we can still talk about. We only have about 20 minutes left or so today, but we can briefly touch on this subject. Let's see. And I can bring this up and we can discuss this briefly. This was a subject that I wanted to talk about a while ago, and this is already actually, number one, old, and number two, it's actually not relevant anymore. But I'm going to talk about this anyway, and then I'll get into the update on this, and we'll talk about the ramifications of it. So this is an article that came out back in December. It does say that or back in November, I guess. It says it was updated on December 4th. I wonder if they got the update in here. Did they post the update? I don't see the update at the bottom. Was the update at the top? No, they didn't. I failed to see how this is updated. Okay. The point is, back in December, November, whenever it was, Sony had announced that because they had a contract with Discovery and Disney that was ending, that they were going to be pulling content from their store. This was a whole bunch of Discovery videos. It was a lot of reality TV shows, but it was also some more popular things like Mythbusters. The problem, however, was that when they lost the license for this stuff, not only did it mean that they were not allowed to sell it anymore, but it meant that they were not even allowed to keep it anymore. And as such, if they were not allowed to keep the stuff on their own servers, or however that works, whether they were streaming it through their servers, I don't know, it meant that not only was Sony losing the content, but every single user who had paid for it was also losing their content. And this is interesting because it really brought to the forefront, for a while at least, I think a lot of people have forgotten about it now. However, a lot of people have not forgotten about it, and that makes it worth talking about. What is ownership? Especially in the modern digital era, what is ownership? What do you own? And how do you even prove that you own it? Now, I have my phone right here in my hands. I own this phone. I paid for this phone. I own this phone. This phone cannot be taken away from me by any legal means. It could be taken, but that would be theft. That would not be legal means. And let's face it, when it comes to theft, well, theft is theft. You can take anything you want. It's a crime, though. It doesn't belong to you as such. I mean, I guess it belongs to you now, but that's a different subject. So what belongs to you? My phone belongs to me. Now, that being said, I also am on Steam. And no, I am not sharing my Steam name. However, shouldn't be that hard to figure it out. So I am also on Steam, and I have a library on Steam of 380 games. Okay? Not the biggest Steam library out there. I'm sure that people can post theirs and they'll probably dwarf mine. But I have a Steam library of 380 games. Okay? 380 games that I ostensibly own. But do I? Do I actually own those games? Do I own anything about them? I mean, I paid for them, but do I actually have them? They're not in my hand. I can't hold them. If the internet goes out, I can't download them. And if Steam decided that they were no longer going to honor my license to those games, then I still wouldn't have access to them. There are a myriad of ways in which I could lose access to them. In which case I have literally nothing, which is something that I struggle with on a regular basis, actually. Again, as I stated at the beginning of this stream, my favorite game is RimWorld. There is no such thing as a physical version of RimWorld. It is an entirely digital game, and most of its assets, namely the mods, come from a digital workshop. So, do I actually own it? That's very subjective. And it's become quite the topic of conversation. See, it's interesting because when I started this off last time, I had a very long lecture planned. I had a lot of different sources pulled up, and I was going to go through a lot of it. But the one thing that I started off last time with was a story about my mother, who, when I was still younger and, living at home, had expressed to me that I was not allowed to spend money online. Not necessarily to buy something on an online website, but to buy things like stuff in games, to buy online currencies and skins and things like that. Do not buy stuff online. The reason why is because in her mind, that was wasting money, because you're spending money and you're getting nothing back for it. You're literally just throwing money into a fire. And that was the rules that I had to live under for a long time. Now, when I grew up and I was moved out, and I was thinking about this, and I said, she made a good point. However, counterpoint. Television. If you pay money for cable television, what do you actually get for your money? Do you get a TV for your money? No, you gotta buy the television yourself. Do you get to keep any of the TV shows that you see on TV? No, you don't. You can record them if you have a VCR, but that's totally different. That would actually be piracy. And we'll get to that in a minute. Do you even get the best experience? Because let's be honest, you are paying money. You're paying money for cable service to your household. And then they run commercials. And so everything was organized into half-hour or 1-hour blocks. However, for every half-hour of content, there was usually about 10 minutes of commercials. So you're paying for content but you're only actually getting 2/3 of what you paid money for, because the rest of the time is commercials you don't want to watch. You never wanted to see those. You don't want to pay for those, but you're gonna deal with them anyway, because, well, what else are you gonna do? And so for a long time I said, you know what? I can see the hypocrisy in this argument, and I'm going to run with it. And so since then, I have lived life as pretty much anyone else my age does, who is into, PC games, stuff like that. I have bought tons of digital games. I even bought digital versions of games that I had in physical copies because digital was just more convenient. And by the way, that trend has continued to the point where now entire stores like Walmart are no longer carrying games at all. There are entire companies who basically do not offer games in physical anymore. I believe Xbox is almost entirely digital. Nintendo is almost entirely digital, and I actually do have a Nintendo Switch, so I'm well aware of that one. You can buy physical copies of most of their games. All of their mainline titles you can get physical copies of, but that's about it. Everything else, digital. PlayStation, I don't know much about PlayStation, but from what I have heard, PlayStation, you can actually buy games. However, most of the PlayStation games that you get are non-functional until you actually put them in and download the assets. So it really brings into question, what do you actually own? Because with the PlayStation, as I just pointed out, even if you went out and bought the game, it doesn't work. And someday in the future, when the PlayStation 5 is old and dusty, and they shut down the networks for the PlayStation 5, all of those games will be useless. So what is ownership? And how do we define it? This is actually something that is becoming a matter of political action, actually, because now it's going to the legislative circles where they're saying, how do we define it in a legal sense? Because depending on how we define ownership, there may be some serious ramifications to this. When it comes to the Sony pulling the content, people had paid for this, and they were told that they own it. Ownership means that it's yours, that you have the ability to possess it, trade it, transfer it, destroy it, whatever you want to do with it. And already that was contentious, because as Xbox users have been, well, not just Xbox actually, but all gamers have been talking about for a long time, if I own something, I am allowed to use, possess, trade, and destroy. Can you trade games? No. No, you cannot. If you have a physical copy of the game, like I have my, I have my little thing of Switch games, I can lend somebody one of the cards in here. However, because I love Hatsune Miku and I love music games, I have the Hatsune Miku Project Diva on my Switch. There is no physical copy of that game in existence. They didn't do that. It was digital only. Can I share that? Can I lend that to a friend? No. No, I cannot. So it lends the question, do I actually own it then? It's a valid question. What does ownership mean in the digital age? So I can own it, supposedly, I can possess it, it's in my Switch. I can use it, I can destroy it, but can I trade it? No. Is this true with anything else? If you have a garden rake, is there anything that the government can do? Is there anything a corporation can do that can tell you you cannot lend that rake to your neighbor. And that brings up a very interesting question of ownership. This question actually goes far beyond games. I used a rake because it is a very ridiculous example. Of course you can share a garden rake. But since we're on the subject of farming, what about seeds? Now, if you don't follow farming, and I come from, several farming communities, so this is something that I'm very familiar with. We live in the era of genetically modified food, specifically genetically modified seeds. If you're familiar with farming, you may be familiar with companies like Monsanto. They will genetically engineer crops with various things like natural insect resistances, natural disease resistances, higher yields, things of that nature. And the thing about those seeds is that, do they own them? When you buy the seeds from Monsanto, do you own them? Number one, can you possess them? Yes. Asterisk. Can you use them? Yes. Can you trade them? No. By contract and by license, you cannot share them. Even if you grow your crops and one of them goes to seed, which would be a defect in the product, and we will get to that in a second, and one of those seeds ends up in a neighboring field, you can be held legally liable for a breach of contract. So can you transfer it? No, and it will be enforced by law. And the last one, can you destroy it? Actually, yes, you can destroy it. However, going back to point one, they also self-destruct. See, the reason why, or one of the ways that these companies like Monsanto make money year after year, is because when you buy the seeds from Monsanto, these seeds are genetically engineered to produce infertile offspring. That is to say that if you buy, say, peas, okay? Let's say you buy peas, okay? You've got peas seed. You go through, you plant all your peas, okay? They grow up into these lovely little sprouts, which then grow up into larger vines, and then they flower. And then once the flowers are pollinated, the petals fall off, the flower grows into a pod, and inside the pod it grows these seeds, which are called peas. And we can crack open the pod, eat the pod is tasty, always eat the pod, it's really good actually, especially if you get like snow peas, that pod is just, eat the pod. But the peas inside, which are your primary fruit of the plant and also the seeds of the plant, any other pea you would be able to plant in the ground and grow another plant. However, Monsanto engineers their plants so that when they go to seed, these seeds are sterile. They're infertile. And so you cannot plant again. Well, this is a bit weird now, isn't it? Because we have been farming for years and years and years and years. Agriculture is one of the first technologies that we can really attribute to human civilization. I mean, it comes basically right after the club and fire. And maybe animal husbandry. I don't know exactly where animal husbandry came in there. But probably agriculture came first. And the idea is simple. You grow your plants. At the end of the year, you save some of the seeds from your plants, and then next year, you replant them, and then you get more. Now that we have genetically engineered seeds, you can't do that. You buy the seeds, they're only good for one planting, and then you have to buy more. So it really begs the question of, do you actually own them? Because they don't work like any other plant in the Earth's history. I say that because this is a subject that is going to impact more than just the video game sector. It already does. Still on the topic of farming, even if it's not the seeds in Monsanto, John Deere, as well as other tractor manufacturers, have been fighting against what's called the right to repair. And if you've never heard of right to repair, it is simply the right for you to be able to dismantle and fix whatever you happen to own. If you have an iPhone and the screen is cracked, can you open up your iPhone and replace the screen? Or if you have like a MacBook or something, can you do the same to that? The answer is no, you cannot. If you try to open up your iPhone, you will brick your iPhone. You have to have specialized tools, not just to open it, but to do the repairs and to put it back together in just the right way in order to make the phone operable again. And the only way to get those tools and those parts is from Apple themselves, which means that the only way to get the parts is to be a certified Apple repair person, which means that you can only repair your device when Apple says you are allowed to repair your device. If you cannot use it, do you own it? Again, going back to my rake example, you buy the rake. However, there's a note that comes with the rake that says you are only allowed to use it if you have direct permission from whoever makes rakes. I don't know who makes rakes these days. Somebody does. I don't know. Does Black & Decker make rakes? Sure, it's a Black & Decker rake now. Okay? You have to get permission from Black & Decker before you can use it. Oh, and by the way, if you use it in the wrong way, let's say that you use your garden rake in the front lawn to pull up sod. Oh, well, that's a violation of the terms and service, and we'll be sending somebody out to confiscate your rake. It sounds ridiculous. Because in terms of a rake, it is ridiculous. But when we're talking about your $1,000 to $2,000 phone, suddenly it's a lot more serious. The same thing is true when it comes to companies like John Deere, because people have these $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 farming tractors that they use to do mass industry farming. And they're not allowed to fix them. Whenever something goes wrong with the tractor, whether it's digital, whether it's mechanical, whatever, they can do nothing. They have to contact the John Deere dealer and have them send out a repair person to fix it, or they have to load it on a trailer and take it to them, losing precious time, sometimes entire days, sometimes a week, because it's going to take you a day to get it there, and then it may be there for several days, and another day to get it back. You could lose weeks of time, usually for something very simple. Now, this has been changing. If you're interested in the right to repair stuff, you can look up a channel called Louis Rossmann, and I can link that in the description later if anyone's interested, or I can post in the Discord. But Louis Rossmann is one of the foremost people talking about right to repair, and he talks about consumer rights in large scale. And this is one of the subjects that he covered as well. Because just like the tractor, where you're not allowed to repair it, you're not allowed to sell it, not allowed to trade it, you're not allowed to do anything with it except what John Deere tells you. When it comes to digital services like games, and even places like Sony or Steam, Epic, whatever, you are granted the ability to play the games with them, or watch the videos and movies with them, or even just use their services only so long as they allow you to. And this really brings up, or it begs the question of what even is ownership anymore. You buy a game, and it's only available so long as the company tells you it's available. You're only allowed to use it so long as the company tells you you're allowed to use it. You are not allowed to trade it, and in some cases, you may not even be allowed to destroy it. So do you actually own it? And as such, if you don't actually own it, then how can they call it ownership? How can they call it purchasing? Because if you go to a place like, I was just on Amazon the other day. In fact, I have Amazon up on my other computer right now. Let me just go to Prime Video and look up something that I bought. Right here. I bought The Venture Brothers Season 7, okay? By the way, if you've never seen The Venture Brothers, what are you doing with your life? Go watch it. But it says, I purchased this. Okay? What does that mean? What does it mean that I have purchased this? Does it mean that I will have permanent access to it? Can I trade it? Can I delete it? Can I do anything to it? The answer to that, of course, is no. No, I cannot. So, what exactly have I purchased? And to be fair, they at least say purchased. What did I purchase? I'm not sure. It doesn't actually say that I own anything. And to be fair, that may be a problem with us. We have long since conflated the idea of purchasing with owning. And maybe that is a distinction that we really have to start making. Because obviously purchase and own do not mean the same thing. Maybe not in the traditional vernacular, but certainly not in the modern day vernacular. Now, interestingly enough, when it came to this story here with Sony and deleting everything, they did actually backtrack on that. And I don't know, well, I'm not going to look for it right now, but they backtracked on that, and now everybody who purchased the content from Discovery will get to keep and maintain access to their content. And that was primarily due to the backlash that came from their decision. Their stupid decision, but their decision at that. But is this really the win that we think it is? It's not. It is a small victory, but it is a small victory in a much larger war. Flame had asked about the whole monopoly thing, and to be fair, it's a very interesting concept to think about. But again, with the rise of like Epic Games and Good Old Games and things like that, Steam no longer has any kind of claim to a monopoly at all. It's not even a thing. It's a bit like saying that, Netflix might have monopoly. Well, that's not true, because Netflix is also in competition with Hulu and Max and Prime and all kinds of other stuff. So there's no more monopolies that we need to worry about, at least there. But the main idea of what is ownership is a common thread that runs through everything in there. And some of it is about what do we actually own? And the other part of that conversation is our own behavioral practices. We do not put as much of an emphasis on ownership as we used to, which is evident by the fact that, at least in gaming, you can't even buy physical versions of most games anymore. The reason why places like Walmart and Target and GameStop and places like that are no longer carrying a whole lot of physical games is because we as a community have stated that we don't care about physical games so much as we care about the convenience of simply being able to download it day one without ever having to leave the house. And so they catered to that. And they said, sure, it's going to save us money on printing and distribution and everything else. We no longer have to burn discs en masse and send them across the country or the world. This is better for us, and if you'll tolerate it, we'll do it. And the end result now is you have nothing. You have nothing but the license, which, if we go back to our conversation about law and what we were talking about with the Texas border earlier, your license is no different than a law. You can hold up a piece of paper and say, but I have a license, okay? I have access to this. And the company can simply look at you and say, no. Because your license has no power. Whereas if the company was to tell you, 20 years ago, back in, what would that have been, the PlayStation era, PlayStation 2 era, you're not allowed to play Metroid. But you can hold up the disc and wave it at them and say, yes, I can, because I have it here, and you can't take it from me. That was a whole different paradigm. Now, the developers and the people who run these networks and these game distributions companies, all that stuff, they have absolute power. They really do. It's because we gave it to them. It's because we tolerated things like digital downloads and day one patches and online streaming and all of this stuff. It's a problem with them, but it's also a problem with us because we're the ones who let it happen. Netflix was convenient, and we fell in love with it because of the convenience. But the thing that we had to give up because of that convenience is going to come around and bite us. And we're seeing that now. It's not impossible to go out and buy a movie. I mean, movies still sell well enough that you can buy pretty much every movie and every TV show you want in physical copy. For the most part. There are some that you can't. I can't argue that. There are some that you can't. But we need to really get back to that. Let's see. Tux says, let's see. Lewis is pretty awesome. He's also done a couple of videos on why piracy is good. I have seen pretty much every single video he's done on why piracy is good. I don't know how I feel about it, because I agree with him, but I'm also not sure that I would follow him on that one. But I'm also not going to stop him either, because he's got a point. And Tux also says, I remember the quartering charged back every purchase he made for online Magic the Gathering after they banned him. It was successful and he got every penny back. That's actually very impressive. I'm surprised. I don't actually watch the quarter anymore. I really have no problem with Jeremy, but I quit following the quartering for two reasons. Number one, I'm tired about hearing about coffee. I hate his coffee company, and I hate that he pushes it in every single video, okay? Every single video could be 10 minutes shorter if you would just snip the coffee. And number two, he's a liar. He's the lowest tier of liar, okay? Every single one of his thumbnails is clickbait. And some of them, not many of them, but some of them were just plainly, blatantly wrong. So I quit following him a long time ago. But it's interesting that after he got banned from Magic the Gathering, he got his money back. That's fascinating. So, anyway, I was talking about ownership and the culture of ownership that we need to regain before we can get out of here, because we have gone a little bit long. It's fine, though. We're going to get out of here soon. I promise. And Tuck says, I don't mind his coffee, but he did push it way too hard. Yes, he did. Also true with the clickbait. Absolutely. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't believe it was true. So we need to get back to a culture of ownership. We need to start demanding everything that we want in physical copy. And that's really, really super hard. And I know that it's really, really super hard because I'm in this with you. On my channel, I do gaming. My current schedule is I have RimWorld Mondays and Wednesdays. And as I already explained, there is no such thing as a physical copy for RimWorld. Tuesdays currently is a game called Fallout Equestria Remains. That was an indie game. And there is no physical copy of that as far as I know. Wednesdays is Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 is an online massively multiplayer online role-playing game, MMORPG. And it only exists so long as the servers for the game exist. Once the servers go down, that game will no longer exist. Now, for Guild Wars 1, I actually do have the physical copies of the game. I have every single box set. Prophecies, Factions, Nightfall, and Eye of the North. I don't actually have anything for Guild Wars 2. No physical version at all. So that's a bad on me. On Thursdays, I'm playing Pokemon Violet, and that I actually do have a physical copy of it, because where I started was my Nintendo Switch, and I said every single game that I get for the Nintendo Switch from now on, I will get the physical copy wherever possible. I mean, if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. But I have a not a huge collection, but I have a collection of Nintendo Switch games now, and I have them all in cartridge. Or in this case, card, I guess. And on Fridays, I'm playing a game called Cosmoteer, which is also kind of an indie game that was distributed through Steam. Again, there is no physical copy of this. It doesn't exist. It is only a digital distribution. Then, as a second video for every day of the week, I have my Humble Spotlight. That comes from the Humble Bundle. That is and always will be a digital download, no matter what it is. Even if it does have a physical copy somewhere. Because I played Doom Eternal on that one, and I'm pretty sure that there was probably a physical disc for Doom Eternal. I can't be positive on that, though. Because even if, and here's the real kicker, even if you buy like these special edition boxes that'll come with, booklets or sometimes little toys or statues or whatever, even if you buy the special editions of these things, oftentimes they don't even come with a disc in them. They will give you the license code for your game in addition to everything else. And Tuck says, you have the Guild Wars 2 Statue of a Char Collector's Edition. Oh my god. That Char is Ritlock Brimstone. And if you still have him, and if his sword is still intact, because the flame on his sword, Sahathan, had a bad tendency to come off, but if you still have him and he is intact, that statue is worth hundreds, if not potentially well over $1,000. That statue of Ritlock Brimstone is the definition of a collector's item. So I mean, that's very impressive. I never bought it when it was coming out. I usually don't go out for special editions. I usually just go for the game and that's about it. But not gonna lie, part of me is just a little bit extremely jealous. That is still super cool though. You got to put pictures up in the Discord. Get some pictures up there because I want to see. Yeah, get some pictures in there. I want to see that. So anyway, that's what we need to do. We need to get back into the culture of ownership. It's not going to be easy. Because for all the time that we have spent allowing the situation to get where it is, where we have gotten comfortable with having digital downloads, with having streaming and things like this, it's like a bad habit and we have to break it. General rule of thumb is it takes 3 times as long to break the habit as it did to form it. This is a general rule of thumb because there's a lot of exceptions to it. Another rule of thumb is it's going to take like 90 days to begin a new habit. So if you already have a habit, it takes 90 days to break it. But in this case, we're not talking about breaking a personal habit. We're talking about changing an entire industry. So just like before, it took a long time for all of these industries to set up digital distribution. It's going to take 3 times as long to get these companies to go back to a physical distribution system. But just because it takes longer does not mean that it's impossible. We can absolutely get them to do this. It's just going to take a concerted effort from people to say, we want physical copies of games. We want full games on the disc, okay? Not half of the game files and then you can download the other half. No, we want a playable version of the games on the disc. We want physical, we want playable, and we want it to work, okay? It cannot be this buggy mess. We need to start having standards for these things. And the thing about standards that makes it very unpopular is it means that we're going to have to be the bad guys here, okay? We're going to have to be the ones that they're going to call entitled. We're going to get called privileged. We're going to get called demanding. Okay, we're going to get called every bad name in the book. Guys, we are going to get called racist for wanting physical copies of games. I don't know why, but I guarantee it's going to happen at some point. And we have to be okay with that now so that we don't back down when it happens. But we need to start making some demands so that we have something left later on, because as it stands right now, you know that whole thing they said about in the future you will own nothing and you will be happy? Right now, we own nothing. Are you very happy about that? It's something for you to really think about. And PC Unicorn's in the chat. Says very late for this, but for the gaming side, if you want to own a game, go to Good Old Games. You can download the game install files DRM free for most of the games on there. And yes, you made me aware of that one. I am still working on that. It does mean that you'll probably have to re-buy a lot of the games, but I'll be honest with you, I have almost 400 games on my Steam, and if most of them went away, I probably wouldn't feel that bad about it. Because I don't have a whole lot of time to play them anyway. That's why I started a YouTube channel in the first place, because I said, you know what, this is going to be my excuse to go through and play a lot of the games that I haven't had time for. What, you think it was like selflessly entertainment for you? No, this is absolutely a selfish endeavor. Speaking of selfish, though, I need to get off of here because I have other things that I have to do today, including a child that has been waiting exceedingly patiently for me to come down and play something with him. So I'm going to have to go do that. But that's my thoughts, not really on the whole Monopoly thing involving Steam, but my opinions on ownership, at least, which I think is the greater concern. Unicorn says, not saying give up your collection, but started looking there for games. Need a dedicated drive for install files. Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. Just, Steam is great. Okay, I love Steam. I really do. I have been using Steam ever since Steam started. Okay, I remember Steam before they really even had like an online store, or at least not much of one. They only had like a few games on there. They had Half-Life, and they had Counter-Strike, and they had Team Fortress. That's how long I've been using Steam. Steam is great. I love Steam. But unfortunately, Steam cannot be the future. And that's where I have to leave that. As much as I love Steam, Steam is a demon. It's a possession. It's not good for anything. It's a parasite. And it needs to be treated, it needs to be excised. For every good thing that it did for gamers, it has done equal to or greater harm to the gaming industry. Not maliciously, they didn't do it on purpose. It's just a side effect of what they did and how successful they were at doing it. I think Good Old Games is a good place to start. But even Good Old Games is just a stepping stone to getting to where we need to get back to. And it's going to take time. It'll take time, it will take dedication, it will take resolution, but we are gamers. If we can sit down and grind out a piece of legendary armor that takes 5,000 armors to craft, or 5,000 hours to craft, we can change an entire industry. So with that bright note, I'm going to go ahead and get off of here. It's been a pleasure seeing everybody here. Hopefully I have an actual subject for next week. Because I can't make every single one of them an open topic, even though this was kind of fun. So, if you enjoyed today, if you got anything out of this, make sure you subscribe. Also, there's a new button down there called Join. This is probably the last time I will mention it, but if you want to join the channel and help support me, the option is there. So, should you choose to do that, should you want to do that, that is now an option. Don't forget to hit the bell icon, that way you get notified every time these videos come out for the streams. I do try to let people know, but unless you're in the Discord, or you're in one of the other Discords that I'm also in, you'll never get those notifications. If you know somebody else who is into either cultural issues, political issues, anything like that, share it with them. They might get something out of my lectures, they might not, I don't know, but it never hurts to try. And let's face it, when it comes to my lecture live streams, YouTube ain't gonna promote this stuff. Like, if anything is gonna get me demonetized, now that I'm finally monetized, it's gonna be this. So, I mean, my brief stint as being a monetized channel may be just that, very brief. Otherwise though, if you just like me, leave a like on the video, leave comments down below, join the Discord. We have a Discord, we have some people in there, everybody's friendly there. Mostly. Okay, there's like one asshole in the Discord and it's actually me, so, you know, deal with that. Otherwise though, I will see you tomorrow for the tabletop stream. We're doing Tau aircraft. Should be fun, because some of them are going to be spacecraft too. Gotta figure out how we're going to work those. It's going to be fun. We're going to work it out together. So join us tomorrow for the tabletop stream. Otherwise, I will see you next week. And until then, take care.